On behalf of the Plyler family, I want to thank you for joining us for this virtual memorial service online. We gather today to remember George Frank Plyler, who died on Wednesday, August 12th, at the age of 70, surrounded by his loving family. His wife of 47 years, Diane Plyler, in their home in McBee, South Carolina. Also present was their daughter, Dr. Nicole Plyler Fisk of Holly Hill, and her husband, Scott, and their children, Arena and Jack. You will hear Nicole deliver the eulogy in a moment, and Scott and Arena and Jack will all participate in the service. I'm a friend of the family. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Ray, and I'm in Springfield, Missouri. The Fisks have made a number of trips up here to participate in conferences in our church here in Missouri, and I have also spoken regularly at the Unitarian Church in Columbia, South Carolina, near their home where they've joined me. I am honored to be a friend of the family and a part of today's service. I invite you to pray with me now. As hard as it often is, still, we love life. We pray in humble acknowledgement of our fear, anger, and discontent in the face of mortality, especially in the loss of those that we love the most. May our faith community cherish both life and the memory of a life well lived, that we may be at peace with both life and death. May we seek forgiveness from ourselves and within our community for what we have said and things we have done that should have been left unsaid and undone. Similarly, we pray for grace in the things that we have left unsaid and undone that we now wish we had said or done. May our sincere affection and intent be translated into the perfect language of holy love. We are grateful to have our musicians, Barry Stacy and my good friend Sean Spires as the vocalist, contributing to today's service.
For our religious reading, I offer a reflection on prayer from Bishop John Shelby Spong. Prayer is that great experience of meeting God. Prayer is a conscious human intention to relate to the depths of life and love, and thereby to be an agent of the creation of wholeness in another. Prayer is the offering of our life and our love through the simple action of sharing our friendship and our acceptance. Prayer is my being called to the being of another, and thus giving that other the courage to dare, to risk, and to be in a whole new way, perhaps inside a whole new dimension of life. Prayer is also my active opposition to those prejudices and stereotypes that diminish the personhood and being of another. Prayer is taking the proper political action to build a society in which opportunities can be equalized and no one will be forced to accept the status quo as his or her destiny. Prayer is the active recognition that there is a sacred core in every person that must not be violated. Prayer is the facing of life's exigencies, which involves us all in the realization that we live subject to a wide array of circumstances over which we have no control. Prayer is not cowering before these circumstances, but rather being willing to meet them with courage. Prayer is the ability to embrace the fragility of life and to transform it even as we are victimized or killed by it. Prayer involves shedding the delusion that we are the center of the universe. Prayer is a call out to childish dependency into a spiritual maturity. So praying and living deeply, richly, and fully have become for me almost indistinguishable. Perhaps I conclude that is what the Apostle Paul meant when he said, "Pray without ceasing," in 1 Thessalonians 5:17, the King James Version, or constantly in the New Revised Standard. We are to live as if everything we say and do is a prayer, calling others to life, to love, and to be.
Hugo's Reflections on Immortality. I feel within me the future life. I am like a forest that has once been raised. The new shoots are stronger and brisker. I shall most certainly rise toward the heavens. The sun's rays bathe my head. The earth gives me its generous sap, but the heavens illuminate me with the reflections of realms unknown. Some say the soul results merely from bodily powers. Why then does my soul become brighter when my bodily powers begin to waste away? Winter is above me, but eternal spring is in my heart. I inhale even now the fragrance of lilacs, violets, and roses, just as I did when I was 20. The nearer my approach to the end, the plainer is the soul of immortal symphonies of worlds which invite me. It is wonderful, yet simple. It is a fairy tale. It is history. For half a century, I have been translating my thoughts into prose and verse, history, philosophy, drama, romance, tradition, satire, ode, and song. All of these I have tried, but I feel that I haven't given utterance to the thousandth part of what lies within me. When I go to the grave, I can say, as others have said, my day's work is done. But I cannot say my life is done. My day's work will recommence the next morning. The tomb is not a blind alley. It is a thoroughfare. It closes upon twilight, but opens upon the dawn.
I'll be reading from The Prisoner of Azkaban. This is for my pa. You think the dead we love ever truly leave us? Your father is alive in you, Harry, and shows himself most plainly when you need him. So you did see your father last night, Harry. You found him inside your cell.
People, a poem by Yevgeny Yevtushenko. No people are uninteresting. Their destinies are like histories of planets. Nothing in them is not particular, and no planet is like another. And if someone lives in obscurity, befriending that obscurity, he is interesting to people by his very obscurity. Everyone has his own secret, private world. In that world is the finest moment. In that world is a tragic hour. But it is all unknown to us. And if someone dies, there dies with him his first snow and first kiss and first fight. He takes it all with him. Yes, books and bridges remain, and painted canvas and machinery. Yes, much is sentenced to remain, but something really departs all the same. Such is the law of the pitiless game. It's not people who die, but worlds. We remember people, sinful and earthly, but what do we know in essence about them? What do we know of brothers, of friends? What do we know of our one and only? And about our own fathers? Knowing everything, we know nothing. They perish, they cannot be brought back. Their secret worlds are not regenerated. And every time I want again to cry out against the unretrievableness. Even though I just read a lament, which is no doubt important to the process of grieving, I promise that my eulogy will be more upbeat. It has to be, because I'm going to tell you the story of my dad. One of my earliest fragmented memories is going to a haunted house with Dad. Although it wasn't technically a house, it was my elementary school, and I was most likely in kindergarten or first grade. It was the Halloween carnival, complete with a costume contest, trick-or-treating booths, and in the stage area of the gymnasium, the haunted house. Dad and I tackled scary things together. This is something I took as a truth from a time that predates memory. My mother tells me that the first time I spent a week at my maternal grandparents' house, sans parents, I was fine until my parents called and Dad told me he was watching a scary movie, at which point I burst into tears. For my 3 or 4 year old protestations, Mom said it was clear I was deeply hurt and offended. I wasn't watching a scary movie and eating popcorn without him. I would never. All of a sudden, I imagined I wanted desperately to be home. Probably at the exact same time, I didn't want to be home because angry at Dad. As we moved through the haunted house together, Dad holding my hand, I remember his voice because that's what always made the scary not scary. Whether on roller coasters or in haunted houses, he'd use his voice to make a joke of it, making nonsense sounds like, woo! He was loud, enthusiastic, and laughing. I learned the power of the ridiculous charm long before J.K. Rowling penned it. The haunted house was less scary than disorienting, all flashing lights and lots of movement, until suddenly everything changed. I was lifted and pulled away from Dad. Someone else in a mask had picked me up and was running towards the opposite end of the stage. I imagined screaming no and my tiny fist beating against the masked man's chest, but I cannot say for sure I did either. I only remember I was afraid. Not because I thought this person was a real ghost or axe murderer. On some level, I think I knew he was a stupid teenager. I was afraid that in his stupidity, he would take me to a place Dad couldn't find me. We seemed to be moving so fast. How could he move so fast? He certainly wasn't moving well. I felt like we were the ball in a pinball machine, bouncing off walls and bodies. The person holding me was laughing too, but his laugh was not Dad's and held no power either to charm or to calm. I had no confidence this person hadn't lost me irretrievably, and imagined we'd be wandering this place, which felt as big to me as King Midas's labyrinth, for hours until the carnival was over and the overhead lights came on. It felt like we were retracing steps. Were we already back at the beginning of the maze? What if I had to go to the bathroom? I remember that fear particularly going through my head, that childhood fear of peeing your pants. Then we were off stage, through a door, and in the brightly lit corridor between the gymnasium and entrance to the school. To this day, I could not tell you who this person was. Reason dictates that he must have been an older cousin or family friend. I imagine my mother trying to calm me much later with something like, "It was just so-and-so. He didn't mean to scare you." What I know for sure is that when I was finally able to see again, I was looking over this person's shoulder, and there was Dad, who had managed somehow to stay one step behind me the entire time. When my mother Diane and father Frank married in 1972, she was 19 and he was 22. They had $97.50 between them, Mom contributing $85 from a savings account and Dad contributing $12.50. Neither of them was especially academically inclined, so after graduating from separate high schools, they went to work. Dad at Sandhills Telephone Company, although he would eventually follow his passion and start his own business, Mackey Vinyl and Aluminum Siding. I remember we had a cartoon cutout from a newspaper, yellowed with age and hanging on our refrigerator. On it, a salesman is talking to a potential customer saying, "But a facelift would cost you $2,000. For a fraction of that cost, we could cover your face with sturdy, carefree vinyl siding." But I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, my father, through sheer audacity and grit, got what he wanted. He saw my mother while working at the telephone company because she had a summer job at the town hall, which she could walk to from her home. When she got to work one day, the clerk, Liv Frostig, motioned her over to a window. "Diane, do you see that young guy?" she asked. "He watched you walk all the way from your house to this building. You wait. He's going to come over here." Mom laughed it off, but sure enough, my dad strolled right on over, introduced himself as Frank Plyler, and asked if she could give him directions to Annie McLeod's house, which he needed to work on. A few months later, he saw her again at a football game, strolled over, reminded her that they'd met before, and asked her out on a date. A year later, he talked her into marrying him, despite having only $12.50 in his bank account. Eventually, he quit that stable job at the telephone company to pursue the career he loved, and managed to go from having $12.50 to enough money and knowledge to build his own two-story home. Because my parents struggled with infertility, it was 6 years and multiple visits to a fertility clinic in Charlotte, North Carolina, until Mom's blood work came back positive for a pregnancy. After Dad got the news, he was working with his brother Don and whistling when Don asked him why he was in such a good mood. "Because I'm going to be a dad," he said. In small-town South Carolina in the late 1970s, I'm sure some balked at the idea of reproductive assistance. I'm obviously glad my parents didn't. I'm thankful to Dad in particular, who told Mom, "Why am I working so hard if I'm not going to have someone to leave it to?" To coming home from work and telling her, "Diane, let's go to that place in Charlotte." My father had audacity. He had grit. It's considered cliche to suggest that girls marry a man who's like their father, but there is a Durham University study published in 2007, the summary of which reads, "Women who enjoy good childhood relationships with their fathers are more likely to select partners who resemble their dads." So it's not surprising that my husband, Scott, is not only like my dad, they can fix anything, love building houses, or fun dads, and always willing to apologize if they mess up. Make it right has become a catchphrase in our family. But they also genuinely liked each other. You do know that your parents are my favorite people, Scott has told me. When Scott asked Dad's permission to marry me, according to time-honored Southern tradition, Dad was so excited that as soon as Mom and I got back from a walk, he said, "Nicole, Scott just asked me if he can marry you." So Scott's subsequent proposal a bit later wasn't exactly a surprise. Now, that's not to say that Scott's just like Dad, and when he's not, he hears about it. His tendency is to avoid confrontation, whereas my father was never afraid of conflict. If a kid was running at a water park and he was afraid they'd slip, he'd say, "Stop running." If someone was swearing in front of a group of kids, he'd tell them to watch their mouths. During his very short stint in a memory care facility, a carer told him that he couldn't climb the fence and leave, to which he replied, "Watch me." My dad had audacity. He had grit. When Dad was diagnosed with vascular dementia at the age of 65, I know people felt sorry for us. We felt sorry for ourselves. And I'm not going to pretend that Dad's dementia wasn't hard at times. And I don't want to undermine the experiences of those who are struggling with a dementia-related terminal illness right now. But what I want to tell you is this. When I listen to the song we just heard, Impossible Dream, I think of my dad. And not necessarily pre-dementia Dad, with all his audacity and grit. The memories that come to mind as much, if not more, are from only the past 5 years. Over the summer, I read Lynn Castile Harper's On Vanishing, Mortality, Dementia, and What It Means to Disappear. Harper, the minister at Riverside Church, writes beautifully about the gift of dementia. She points out that before it became pathologized, before it was named an illness, many viewed it, as with Ralph Waldo Emerson, as an almost spiritual state. She brings together voices of dementia sufferers who describe themselves as being rewoven, also to experience love and passion for the first time in decades, who describe dementia as full of paradoxes, one of which is that they know so much more than they did before, such as the gift of being present. So let me tell you now about Frank Plyler with dementia. The joy my father got from his grandchildren was something to watch. Jack, in I think typical 10-year-old fashion, is an imitator, making these nonsense sounds like me that drive me to distraction. Dad loved it though. Would repeat me right back at him, and they were ceaselessly entertained by each other. Still a cuddlebug, more often in bed with one of us than not, Jack always wants to tell me a train story. "Why?" I complained once recently. "Do you always want to talk when I'm so sleepy?" "Because didn't you know I tell Pop bedtime stories to help him sleep?" Jack said. Dad, so often restless at night, was apparently Jack's biggest and only fan of train stories. What a dream and a privilege for a 10-year-old enthusiast. One of the common questions you get from others when you love someone with dementia is, "Does he recognize you?" About this, Harper quotes medical anthropologist Janelle Taylor, who authored the article on recognition, caring, and dementia in 2008, and says about her mother, "She may not recognize me in a narrowly cognitive sense, but my mom does recognize me as someone who is there with her, someone familiar perhaps, and she does not need to have all the details sorted out in order to care for me. This past Christmas, I treated Mom and Dad and the kids to candlelight evenings at Biltmore House, something Mom's always wanted to experience, although she found it exhausting. She would joke that she and Dad have one good body and one good mind between the two of them, as he ran circles around all of us physically. She can keep every one of us straight regarding details, but she has arthritic knees. Although fun, there was one scary moment between Mom, me, and the kids. We had 4 sets of eyes to keep track of Dad, so figured we'd be fine. But there was this one moment after we'd done the tour when our 4 sets of eyes were looking at our souvenir photo, and in seconds, Dad was gone. What if he had gotten on the shuttle bus and then dropped off at any number of parking lots? Mom was beside herself and wobbly from all the stairs she'd had to climb. So I positioned her and Jack on a bench in a centralized section so they could scan the crowds while remaining stationary. Arena and I ran to the shuttle buses because I wanted to make sure first that he wasn't in that area from which he could so quickly get even farther. Before working our way back to Jack and Mom, it was like that haunted house in 1985 all over again, but reversed. I was looking for him and felt he could be anywhere. In the end, we didn't find him. He found us. Arena and I had just passed the souvenir booth again when we saw him, having seen us first, and strolling as confidently up to us as he did to Mom at that football game, with a look like, "Where in the world were you?" He couldn't have told us our names that night, but he knew we were his and he was ours. He had dementia, and he still found me. One of the most important voices Harper includes in her study is John Swinton, a theologian of disability and dementia, who she summarizes as follows: "The problem is not so much that people forget. It is that they are forgotten. The problem isn't their deficits. It is our distance. Not only do they, the forgotten, miss the gift of our presence, we miss the gift of theirs." I am not surprised that my dad experienced what's called terminal restlessness right before his death. Like dementia, it sounds horrible when it's pathologized. Basically, Dad walked with Mom and Arena chasing after him here and there and to and fro in Mom's flowers, dragging the water hose from the front yard to the backyard until he literally couldn't anymore, like the Energizer Bunny finally out of batteries. But it's also so reminiscent of the hero in the song we just heard, because I'll never hear it without thinking of Dad on that last glorious quest, using that last ounce of courage, reaching for that last unreachable star. What a strong presence. What a priceless gift.
In the quiet, misty morning, when the moon has gone to bed, when the sparrows stop their singing, and the sky is clear and red, when the summer ceased its gleaming, when the corn is past its prime, when adventure's lost its meaning, I'll be home, the me free to find my calling, and I'll return to you somehow. If you find it's me you're missing, if you're hoping I'll return to your thoughts, I'll soon be listening. In the road I'll stop and turn, then the wind will set me racing as my journey nears its end, and the path I'll be retracing when I'm homeward bound again. Bind me not to the pasture, chain me not to the plow, set me free to find my calling, and I'll return to you somehow. In the quiet, misty morning, when the moon has gone to bed, when the sparrows stop their singing